everyone, hope you're doing great. Today we're going to learn something very important, something that the English language learners usually find difficult, which is active and passive voice. But you'll be able to change the voice by following a few simple steps that I'm going to share with you. So without further ado, let's get started. Before moving to active or passive voice, we need to see what voice is. The voice of a verb expresses whether the subject has performed or received the action. Verbs have two kinds of voices, that is, active voice and passive voice. If the subject performs the action, the voice is said to be active. And if it receives the action, the voice will be passive. Let's learn the difference between these two voices. The most commonly used voice is active voice, and it describes the subject doing the action. The structure of an active sentence is subject, verb, and object. Look at the example. Jenny is eating the cake. In this sentence, Jenny is the subject or the actor performing the action of eating, and the cake is the object of the sentence. You can see in all these examples, the underlined words are the subjects doing the action, and all these sentences are in active voice. What is passive voice? Passive voice means that the subject is the recipient of the verb's action. In a passive sentence, we have the object first, then verb, and then a subject. It means the subject changes its place and becomes the receiver of the action. See the examples? The cake is being eaten by Jenny. The fish was caught by the bear. The books will be collected by me. In these sentences, the cake, the fish, and the books are the objects, and Jenny, the bear, and me have become the recipients of the action. An easy way to remember the difference between the two is that in active voice, a sentence emphasizes the subject performing an action, while in the passive voice, the sentence emphasizes the object or the action of the sentence. The first sentence is in active voice and the second one is in passive voice. Joe is the subject or the doer of the action. He is doing recycling, and the bottles is the object of recycling. Both sentences are essentially saying the same thing. But in the first one, the focus is on Joe, who's the doer of the action. And in the second one, the focus is on the bottles. Let's discuss how we can change the voice. You have to follow 4 steps for changing an active sentence into passive voice. The first one is identify subject and object. Look at this sentence. The teacher explained the lesson. What is the subject? The teacher. What is the object? The lesson. Second step, interchange the positions of the subject and the object. Means you'll bring the lesson at the place of the teacher and vice versa. Step number 3, we always use the third form of the verb or past participle with its be form in passive voice. As you can see, this is the example of past indefinite tense. We use the be form was or were for this tense. Since the subject was singular, we have used was over here. So, the lesson was explained, and explained is the past participle here, and we use past participle in all passive sentences, no matter what the tense is. Step number 4, add preposition by before the agent. The teacher is the agent over here, and we have added the preposition by before it. Preposition by is used most of the time, but you know there are always some exceptions to the rule. Some other prepositions are also used in certain cases. See these examples. The water fills the tub. The tub is filled with water. He knows me. I'm known to him. So we have used the prepositions with and to over here. While conversion of active sentences to passive voice, we also change the pronouns. Look at this table and learn how the pronouns change. I changes into me. We into us, he into him, she into her, and they into them. Whereas you and it do not change their form. Their subjective and objective cases are the same. Before applying these rules to the sentences, we need to learn about transitive and intransitive verbs as well. Transitive verbs require an object to complete their meaning, an object that receives the action. Imagine if I say they bought. There is information that is missing. You're probably wondering what they bought. This sentence is incomplete. because bought is a transitive verb and a transitive verb needs an object after it to complete the sentence. So if I add they bought a house, the sentence gets complete and we can understand it. We have added the object a house after the verb, and the object after a transitive verb can be a noun or a pronoun. Another example, she likes chocolates, where likes is a transitive verb followed by an object, which is chocolates. You need to remember one thing over here, that we can convert only those sentences into passive voice that have transitive verbs. Means the sentences having an object can be converted into passive voice, otherwise it's not possible to change the voice of a sentence. Some transitive verbs can be used with a direct object and an indirect object. Means they can have two objects. The indirect object tells to or for whom the action is done. In the following examples, notice the difference between the direct and indirect objects. He sent Robert the letter. The direct object is the letter over here that receives the action. The indirect object Robert is the person to whom the letter is sent. If we add what with the verb, the answer we get is the direct object. For instance, if I say sent what, the answer would be the letter, which is the direct object. And if you want to find the indirect object, you can do so by asking the question to whom or for whom. To whom was the letter sent? The answer is to Robert. So Robert is the indirect object. She gave her class the lecture. The lecture is the direct object in this sentence, and her class is the indirect object. What are intransitive verbs? They are the verbs that cannot have a direct object after them. The subject is doing the action of the verb and nothing receives the action. In other words, an intransitive verb does not pass the action to an object. Look at the example. He arrived. Here we cannot have an object after the intransitive verb arrive. An intransitive verb expresses an action that is complete in itself and it does not need an object to receive the action. The apple fell from the tree. Fell is an intransitive verb here, and from the tree is not an object, it is an adverbial phrase here. So now we know that transitive verbs have an object after them and they are the ones that can change their voice. On the contrary, we can't change the voice of the sentences that have intransitive verbs. Different tenses take different be forms while changing the voice. Here is an easy way to remember them. Whenever you see do or does, you change them into is, am, are, depending on the new subject. Did is replaced by was or were. Will shall converts into will be or shall be. And remember, we use third form of the verb in passive voice. Using the rules that we have discussed, let's convert these sentences from active voice to passive voice. These sentences are of present indefinite tense. We know that do or does is replaced by is, am, or are. But how will you identify the simple sentence of present indefinite tense? The simple sentence of this tense consists of first form of verb, as you can see in this example. They grow plants. Grow is the first form of verb. Sometimes you can also see the addition of s or es with the verb in simple sentences of this tense. Let's change the voice of these sentences. The first one is they grow plants. What is the subject in this example? They. What's the verb? Grow. What's the object? It's plants. So we'll bring the object in the beginning, plants. Then we'll add the be form are because our subject is plural. Then third form of grow, which is grown. Finally, the objective case of they, which is them. Plants are grown by them. You have to be careful while choosing the be form. It should be selected according to the new subject. He does not cook food. It's a negative sentence, and remember, negative sentence will remain negative and interrogative sentence will remain interrogative in the passive voice. So the passive of this sentence will be food is not cooked by him. Does she purchase books? Books is plural, so we'll add be form are with it. Are books purchased by her? Where do you play cricket? Remember, you need to be careful in case of WH words. You'll place the auxiliary verb right after WH word in the passive structure. So we'll have where is cricket played by you? So these are the examples of past indefinite tense. In simple sentences of past indefinite tense, we use second form of verb, whereas in negative and interrogative sentences, we use first form of verb with the auxiliary verb did. You already know that we use was and were in the passive sentences of past indefinite tense. Let's convert these sentences. Raima cleaned the floor. The floor was cleaned by Raima. Numan did not call all friends. All friends were not called by Numan. Did she serve the guests well? Were the guests served well by her? When did he send the email? When and then the auxiliary was. When was the email sent by him? Then we have future indefinite tense. We do the addition of be with will and shall in the passive voice of future indefinite tense. Zara will sew the bag. We'll bring the bag in the beginning. And then we'll write down the be form. The bag will be. The third form of the verb sew, which is sewn. The bag will be sewn by Zara. I shall not deliver the speech. The speech will not be delivered by me. You can notice that we have inserted not between the auxiliary will and be. Will you mop the floor? Will the floor be mopped by you? Again, notice that we have inserted the object floor between will and be. How will you solve the question? How will the question be solved by you? There are several times when the passive voice is useful. We use passive voice when we do not know who did the action. Means we don't know anything about the agent. Example, my wallet has been stolen and I don't know who stole it. I don't know anything about the agent. The second situation, we think the agent is not important or interesting. Look at the example. Our house is being painted. We're just concerned about the process of painting. So the focus here is on the action rather than on the agent. And the third situation, the agent is obvious. Means we already know about it or we can guess about it. Example, I'm paid weekly. It's obvious that my employer pays me or my company pays me. Situation number 4, we want to avoid responsibility for our own actions, typically found in government reports. Mistakes were made and unfortunately never rectified. The Prime Minister actually made mistakes that were never rectified. So these are some of the situations where we preferably use passive voice. Sometimes students get mixed sentences and they are asked to change the voice of both kind of sentences. The question is how to identify a passive sentence. You have to see 3 things for that. Notice if the sentence has any of these auxiliary verbs, which are is, am, are, being, been, or be, followed by a past participle, then the sentence is in passive voice. Some of the examples of participles are written, driven, drawn, known, learned, broken, discovered, etc. You may have preposition plus agent in some of the sentences, but these are optional, and every passive sentence may not have them. This is the practice exercise for you based on present indefinite tense. You'll change active sentences into passive voice and passive into active. Remember, the ones in blue font are in passive voice. You'll try to solve them on your own and then you can see the answers. So these are the answers. This exercise is based on past indefinite tense. Be careful while choosing the be forms during conversion. Next we have the sentences of future indefinite tense, and remember while converting that we use third form of the verb in all passive sentences. And here are the answers. Thank you so much for watching. Do hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and share.